The pink palace was the kind of house that looked embarrassed to be standing. Its paint had once been a bold, confident pink, the color of birthday cakes and cheap roses. But now it clung to the wood in tired strips, dulled by years of rain and neglect. The porch sagged in the middle, as if it had spent too long holding its breath. Ivy crawled up one side like a slow sickness, threading itself into cracks and seams the way something living might try to stitch a body closed. Willie stood in the doorway with a box pressed to his ribs and felt the familiar weight settle behind his eyes. Not fear, not exactly, the other feeling, the one that came right before disappointment. Here we go again. His mother moved through the hallway with the careful cheer adults put on when they're trying to sell a place that doesn't sell itself. "It's got character," she said too brightly. His father didn't look at the house the way Willie did. His father looked at it like a project, like a problem he could solve if he applied enough force. "This is different," his father said, as if repeating it made it true. Willie nodded because nodding ended conversations faster, and Willie had learned that ending conversations was a kind of magic. He carried his box down the hall to the room they'd assigned him and set it on the floor. The room smelled like dust and old wood and emptiness that had been waiting a long time for someone to return. Light from a single window fell across bare walls, pale and unimpressed. Willie stared at the blank space and felt anger flare up in his chest. Hot and sharp and unfair, they moved again and again and again, always with the same hope attached to it like a tag. Maybe here, he'll finally make friends. As if the problem was the place. As if loneliness was a geographic issue. Willie didn't hate people. He didn't even hate the idea of friends. He just hated the way the world asked him to perform. In books, he didn't have to perform. In books, a boy could be quiet without being wrong. A boy could be alone without being pitied. A boy could live inside his head and still be the most important person in the story. He opened the box and started with his posters. Not because he was excited, but because he needed something familiar on the walls before the room swallowed him whole. A dragon arced across one print, scales inked in careful detail. A wizard's tower rose under a bruised sky. A map of a land that didn't exist, except it did. Inside the clean certainty of pages, he had just pressed the top corner of a poster flat when his father appeared in the doorway. Willie felt it before he heard anything. The tightening of the air, the way his father's disapproval took up space. His father's eyes flicked to the wall, to the dragon, to the tower, to the proof that Willie's mind refused to live where it had been told to live. "You still doing this?" his father asked. Willie kept smoothing the paper with his thumb. A slow, steady motion. A way to keep himself from shaking. "It's my stuff," Willie said. His father exhaled through his nose, sharp and impatient. "We didn't move all the way here for you to keep your head in the clouds." Willie's stomach tightened. "It's time," his father continued, "for you to get into reality. Put those fantasy things away. Stop living in a dream world that doesn't exist." The words struck with a precision that made them worse. Not shouted, not dramatic, just certain. Like a sentence handed down by someone who believed the world belonged to him. Willie's throat burned. His eyes prickled, and he hated himself for that too. He tried to picture himself explaining how the books weren't escapism so much as oxygen, how pretending was the only place he ever felt chosen instead of tolerated, how some people needed stories the way other people needed sunlight. But he didn't say any of it. Willie had learned that explaining yourself to someone who didn't want to understand was like speaking into a closed mouth. "I know," he lied. His father nodded like he'd fixed something, like he'd set the boy back into place. Then he walked away. A few minutes later, the familiar sound rose through the house. His parents arguing, his father's frustration snapping like a whip, his mother's voice strained and quiet, trying to soften edges that never stayed soft. Willie waited. He always waited. He knew the pattern. When his father turned his anger fully toward his mother, he stopped looking for Willie. When his mother started apologizing for things she hadn't done, his father leaned in, hungry for the feeling of being right. That was Willie's opening. He slipped into the hallway and moved like the house belonged to him. Silent, practiced, invisible. The pink palace creaked under his feet anyway. It complained as if it resented being stepped on, as if it wanted him to know it was awake. The basement door stuck, swollen in its frame, like it hadn't been opened in years. Willie forced it and stepped down into air that smelled wet and old. Dirt, rotting cardboard, wood that had absorbed too many winters. There was a thin grey light from a small window near the ceiling, but the corners of the basement stayed thick with shadow. Boxes sat like collapsed monuments. Old furniture hunched under sheets, shapes that resembled bodies when Willie didn't look directly at them. He didn't know what he was looking for. A secret door, a hidden room, a reason, something that would make this house less ordinary, something that would justify the itch under his skin that whispered, "This place is not just a place." He stepped between a broken chair and a rolled rug, and then he saw it. A glistening point of light, sharp as a blink. Willie froze. It flickered again, quick and wrong, like something reflective had caught a light source that didn't exist down here. His heart thudded, and for a second he felt it. An electric spark of hope, the kind stories always started with. He moved toward the corner slowly, careful not to make sound, as if the thing might vanish if startled. Behind the chair, half tucked into the shadows, sat a doll. Not a baby doll, a figure, a wizard. Long robe, white beard, tall hat, a cape that draped with weight and intention, not the limpness of forgotten cloth, and two black button eyes. They were glossy, round, and unnaturally clean, as if someone had polished them while the basement slept. They caught the dim light and threw it back, wet and sharp. Willie stared too long. Something about the doll felt placed, not abandoned, not lost. It sat in that corner the way an object sits in a story when it's meant to be found. He crouched and picked it up, brushing a film of dust from the robe. The fabric didn't feel old in his hands. It felt kept. The wizard's cape and hat were a deep midnight blue, stitched with tiny silver threads that looked like stars. Willie's fingers went cold, because upstairs, in a box in his closet, he had a cape and hat like that. Not identical, but close enough that his stomach twisted into a knot. A costume he'd worn in private, when no one could see. When it was safe to be the version of himself he liked. Coincidence, Willie whispered. But the word didn't settle right. The wizard's face was wrinkled and kind, in the way powerful characters always were. The kind of character who stood at the edge of the story and nudged the hero toward the door he was afraid to open. A guide. Willie turned the doll slightly, studying its face, and felt something strange pulse in his chest. resemblance. Not physical, exactly. The wizard was old. Willie wasn't. And yet, Willie had always imagined himself like this when he read. Not the boy with the book. The boy who became something more. The boy who grew into importance. He held the wizard close and stood. Upstairs, the arguing had started to fade into a quieter, sharper tension. The kind that meant it would go on for a while. He carried the doll to the kitchen anyway. His mother was stacking plates with tight hands. His father was at the table with his laptop open, jaw clenched, like the fight had moved inside him. Willie held the wizard out. "Look what I found," he said, forcing the words to sound casual. Like this didn't matter. Like he didn't want it to matter. His mother's face softened. "Oh, honey." His father looked up, and the softness never had a chance to land. His father's expression hardened immediately, like a door slamming shut. "Seriously," his father said. "It was in the basement," Willie replied. It wasn't a defense so much as a plea. "Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that mean something?" His father's frustration snapped. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Fantasy, dolls, wizards. You're 13, Willie." Willie's face burned. The wizard's cloth body felt heavy in his hands. "It's just a doll," Willie said, but his voice came out thin. His father leaned back, eyes sharp. "It's not just a doll. It's you refusing to grow up." He glanced toward Willie's mother, like she was part of the problem too. "We moved here for you to make friends, for you to have a normal life. And you're still clinging to this nonsense." Willie's fingers tightened around the wizard doll so hard, the seams pressed into his skin. His mother stepped forward, voice soft. "Let him unpack. It's not hurting anyone." Something in his father flared, and suddenly the kitchen filled with voices again. His father's sharp anger, his mother's tired resistance. Words looping the way they always looped, around blame and fear, and the helplessness of wanting a child to be different. Willie didn't stay to listen. He turned and walked away with the wizard in his arms. Not running, not slamming doors, just disappearing. In his room, he sat on his bed and placed the wizard doll on the desk, facing him. The house held the sound of arguing in its walls like trapped breath. Willie stared at the wizard's button eyes and felt the ache in his chest widen. He didn't know what he wanted exactly, only that he wanted away from the shape of his life, away from the constant moving, the constant disappointment, the constant feeling that he was the wrong kind of kid. He looked at the posters he'd put up anyway, defiant. Then he looked back at the doll, and he smiled, small and helpless, because having something that didn't judge him felt like companionship. He leaned closer and spoke quietly, as if speaking too loud might make the wish stupid. "I wish things were different," he whispered. "I wish I really was a wizard." He swallowed. "I wish I was away from this place." He looked away for only a second, long enough to blink hard, long enough to breathe through the sting behind his eyes. And in that second, a glint crossed both buttons. Not a reflection of the window, not a trick of light, something colder, something deliberate, like a blink. Willie didn't see it. He went back to unpacking. That was what he did when feelings got too big. He organized. He made piles. He controlled corners of the world. He hung his fantasy posters higher, stubbornly proud. He unpacked his books and lined them up like soldiers. He placed his wizard cape and hat where he could reach them, even though he knew his father would hate it if the world wanted him to be normal. It was going to have to fight him for it. That night, he fell asleep with the wizard doll on his nightstand. The pink palace creaked and settled around him like a body finding a comfortable position. Willie woke to a sound, a small creak in the hallway. His eyes opened slowly. His door was open. He was sure it had been closed. A cold breeze slipped through the crack and moved over his face, lifting his hair like invisible fingers. Willie sat up, rubbing his eyes. Down the hallway, faint light spilled across the floor. Not the warm yellow of a lamp, not the hard white of a bulb, a glow that didn't match anything they owned. It pulsed softly, as if it had its own breath. Willie stared, heart thudding, not with fear, but with curiosity sharp enough to pull him out of bed. The kind of curiosity that always got heroes into trouble. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the beginning. He reached for the wizard doll and held it against his chest like a talisman, a guide, a comfort, a piece of story in a house that felt too real. He stepped into the hallway barefoot. The floorboards were cold. The glow waited beyond the stairs. But to reach the stairs, he had to pass his father's office. Willie paused and peered into the room. His father was awake, sitting at the computer, face lit in harsh monitor light. Working, even in the dead hours of the night, jaw set like he could outrun his own life if he typed fast enough. Willie's stomach clenched. He looked down at the wizard doll. "Should I attempt this?" he whispered. Then he lifted the doll slightly, focusing on its button eyes, and something slid over him. Not a voice, not words, a trance-like certainty, slow and sticky, like his thoughts had been dipped in honey and held there. Not time yet. Willie blinked, and the feeling vanished as quickly as it had come. He stood very still in the hallway, the glow still calling from somewhere beyond, and understood, without understanding why, that if he went now, he would be seen, stopped, punished. Or worse, he would lose the thread of whatever this was. He exhaled softly. "We'll investigate this in the morning," he whispered, almost smiling. "Just you and me." He looked at the wizard doll as if it had agreed. Then he turned back toward his room, careful and silent. Behind him, the glow waited. And inside the walls of the pink palace, something older than patience listened like a spider listening for vibration through its web. Because it didn't need to rush. The doll had done its work. The house had done its work. Willie had spoken the wish out loud, and the beldam had learned his name. She did not stand in the hall to hear him. The house heard him. The pink palace had been empty long enough to forget what it was supposed to be. And in that forgetting, it had become something else. A listening thing. A hungry thing. A body with nerves in its wood and bones in its beams. She lived beneath it, inside it, behind it, pressed into cracks the way damp presses into plaster. When children walked, she felt it. When they cried quietly, she felt it more. And the doll, stitched and star-cloaked, was not only cloth and thread, it was an anchor. A needle sunk into the world's skin, catching the smallest tremors of longing. Willie's father had handed her a gift without meaning to, not with kindness, with shame. He had tried to press the boy's imagination flat, and imagination did not flatten. It curled, it resisted, it pushed back harder when suffocated. She liked them best like this, lonely, misunderstood, certain the world was wrong and they were meant for something else. She held still and gathered the details as one gathers thread. A boy who wore wizard cloth in secret. A boy who escaped when adults fought. A boy who believed he was the main character. A boy who made wishes like prayers. She could wait, because waiting was part of feeding, and Willie had already wrapped the first loop of string around his own fingers.